Well, hi, friends. Welcome to episode 364 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 19th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast is something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me on Facebook, on Threads, and on Instagram. You can find me at School Librarians United and on Bluesky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now for today's episode, Professional Identity, a Journey, and my conversation with Dr. Wendy Pray. Pray, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, Amy. Always a pleasure to talk library life with you.
Well, and you know, this is fifth time's a charm. This is your fifth episode, but the first time as Dr. Pray.
Exactly.
And I want to just keep on saying that. It's like, Dr. Pray, we're so fortunate to have you on the show with us today.
I don't feel like Dr. Pray, I got to be honest. It's still like very surreal and very... I don't feel it. We have a expression in Spanish that says, I'm just going to say it in Spanish and then I'm going to roughly translate it. But it is, no te ha caído el 20, which means it hasn't landed on you. Whatever this big thing is, hasn't landed. Like you don't feel the full weight of it yet. That's super roughly translated. My apologies for all the Spanish speakers out there.
So you mean to tell me you haven't ordered new business cards yet?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. I should though, but yeah, I'm not even there yet.
All right. But you've changed the signature on your email. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am, I sure have.
Yes, you have. I know. I received a state award earlier this year, and you better believe I went home and I had to add a little image on my signature, and I had to add this, and you know, you want to make it real.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to be our own big cheerleaders. I know people are not comfortable with self-advocacy. I know we do it for our libraries and we do it for our service, but we don't do it for ourselves. You know, and I just presented on personal branding at the Texas Library Association conference at the end of March, and that's one of the things we talked about, like how you are the defining element in this space that is the library. So we need to toot our own horns, absolutely.
Oh, I don't disagree. So, you know, you and I when I went back to look, and friends, I have linked all of Wendy's episodes, and I had to date them because our friendship is, you know, we've now, I know that we've crossed paths on social media before April of 2021, and we definitely met for the first time in Salt Lake.
All right, October
in 2020. That's right, October 2021 for AASL. Yeah. And I have pictures to prove it.
Yeah, that's right.
Pictures to prove it. But then we met a couple more times to record episodes. And it is interesting because I realized when we recorded in October about Librarian in the Wild, that was very much connected to the conversation that we're going to have today.
Yeah, that's right.
And I didn't realize it at the time, but having that opportunity to be able to share, you know, where you were, because you were very in much, and I know that we'll bring that into the conversation, but talking about some of the, dare I say, detours, the detours that our profession can sometimes result in us taking. It's a lot of times we're responding to the changes that happen to us, and oftentimes unwelcome.
Right. Yeah. Unforeseen. I would even say not just detours, but derailments. Sometimes it's just a complete derailment. And so you're faced with trying to make the best out of a pretty stinky situation.
Well, but I think when we look at each other and the things that we post on social media, we usually do not post the train wreck that is our professional lives. We usually try to reveal some aspect of our personal life or our professional life in a way that can be positively portrayed and received. We usually do not broadcast the train wreck in real time. We might come out the other end and say, so this is new. It's been a while. I haven't checked in and I'm fine, but it's been something of a train wreck.
Yeah, we seem to be very strategic in how we curate, what we put online. And it's all about, like you say, portraying something that's positive. People don't sometimes want to see the ugly. It's the good, bad, and the ugly. Sometimes people don't want to see the bad. Sometimes don't want to see the ugly. Always the good. And so that like conditions us, right, to just put the good stuff out there.
Sure. So today's conversation addresses how we as individuals navigate a professional crisis. If you stick with this long enough, you will have a professional crisis. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer. I'm sure there are some sort of rare examples out there of folks who have never stumbled. They've never had anything less than some exceptional experience in their journey as a school librarian. But I'm going to tell you right now, I have been absolutely candid about my own journey as a school librarian. I stayed in a job that my colleague described as a slow death. And I chose to start this podcast. I didn't at the time have the option to leave. I certainly couldn't give up that health insurance. And so I created a podcast because there wasn't a darn thing I could do about my job situation. And to be quite honest, I was making my family miserable. And I'll tell you what, going back to grad school was also not an option because at the time we were trying to find how we were going to fund the 3 children we had raised and how they were going to go to college. So yes, and yet when you faced the professional crisis, you decided to get a PhD. That's amazing.
Yes, it happened it was a very serendipitous experience. It was right, I would say February of 21 was when I had someone who was a professor at Texas Tech reach out and ask me. They were following me on Twitter at the time when it was still Twitter, of all the great things I was doing with my kiddos and novels and books and putting books in their hands and doing all these wonderful things that we librarians do. And he asked me, when are you going to get your PhD? And I said, I'm not going to get a PhD because in Texas, it is not financially wise, right? There's no stipend. There's no sort of like raise, no sort of financial compensation for a PhD. And so I said, it's not in the cards for me. And so then they started to talk to me a little bit more about the program and about the scholarships available. And I said, okay, you've got my attention. And then it just so happened that I received a 4-year fellowship, which is a 4-year scholarship to this university. And so I said, it's real. Things just got real. And now you're going to get a PhD. And what else are you going to do? It's February 2021. Nobody's going out. Nobody's doing anything, outside. Let's do that. So that's how my PhD journey began way before my professional identity crisis or my professional road bump, or I don't know what we're going to call it, speed bump. Sometimes it seemed as small as a speed bump. Sometimes it was a full-blown derailment, but it happened way before then. Things were set in motion. So
Yes. Well, and I think that we are always sort of on the path that we've chosen until life intervenes, until something intervenes with what we are doing, and we are caught off guard. We sit there and go, wait, I didn't sign up for this. This was absolutely not what I signed up for. And, you have a lot of options, and yet sometimes you don't. And you find yourself, nobody should be miserable at doing the work that they do, especially when so many of us becoming school librarians, wasn't our first calling. We actually went to school to become a school librarian because we realized as educators that there was something missing and we wanted to move into this space. And if something compromises that experience, all of a sudden we're like, oh, hold on. That is absolutely not what I signed up for. Over the years that I've known you, I've come to realize that you are a risk taker. And there's so much we can learn from the path that you've chosen, because in many ways, you've faced challenges that other people can identify with. The difference is in how you chose to respond. I'm going to tell you right now, on Facebook, I was reading a couple posts and somebody was like, convince me that I shouldn't leave the profession because I'm so miserable and things aren't working out. Should I go back to the classroom? Every day, especially in the spring when those job postings start to come up, you get people who are currently school librarians who are not living their best lives. And they're like, you know what? I think I can fix this right away by walking away from this profession. And I was like, oh, no. First of all, we have a whole playlist called Overcoming Obstacles. Because friends, you think that this was supposed to be like a cakewalk? Nothing that is worth what we do a cakewalk. We absolutely are always going to find that we need to navigate something that we hadn't anticipated. But I see it all the time. People are like, oh, I think I'm going back to the classroom because this is disappointing and this isn't what I thought it was going to be like. And I was like, oh, hold on. Let's see what we can do to, I don't know, find a way to reach a place where you can be happy.
There's so many elements, though, Amy, to there's so many cogs in that wheel, so many gears that interplay with what we do in the school that it's just so hard to say, you know what? Stop, evaluate. There's the administrators that dictate their leadership or I would say management style, because I'm sorry, being a leader and being a boss is not the same thing. So sometimes their management style is not supportive of literacy and what you do in the library. And so a lot of those things bind us. Like we find ourselves, with all these constraints. And so that does put us in kind of a pressure cooker type of place, and kind of like, what are you going to do? It's fight or flight. And yes, I do need my health insurance. Yes, I do have people who depend on me. So you know what? I can't pivot like some other people can pivot. It's funny that you say that you think of me as a risk taker, because I do not see myself as a risk taker at all. I'm like, oh my gosh, what? It may seem like, man, Wendy, you've got guts, like just walking away from something like that. But it really was something very, very hard for me to do. And I also found myself in a place where I was like, man, there's some serious misalignment with my core values as a professional and with the system that is in place. It's not so much the people, it's this system that has been on a path. And there's nothing really that I can do to change the rudder on that beast. This is just the way the truth of things are. And so what I can do is change myself. And so what am I going to do? And man, and I got to be honest with you, like this change and having to deal with evaluating everything that had been putting these pressures on me as a librarian in this particular place where I was at the time made me really get deep inside of myself and say, okay, Wendy, what do you stand for as a librarian? What do you stand for as a professional educator? How do your morals and what you know to be true about educating people, like how much of that are you willing to compromise and how much of that are you willing to not? Some of these are non-negotiables. And staring at myself in the mirror like that, Amy, I'm going to tell you, was not easy. Was not easy. And then you mix in, oh, Wendy, you have a wonderful following on social media. People are looking at everything that you're doing. You've been posting all the wonderful things. Remember, we talked about that a little bit earlier, curating all of the wonderful things that you're doing in the library. For you to just say, I'm leaving, how will that be perceived? And are you okay with that? all these things together.
And for those in our audience who have listened to episode 339, Librarian in the Wild, you did take a sort of a hiatus from the school library to work in credit recovery.
Right.
For people who have never experienced credit recovery, you're really sort of working with students who have struggled so much in a traditional classroom that they're taking classes online,
Right.
but in your presence. And it is, it truly can be disheartening because instead of working with students who on some level love school and they love being there, these are students for whom traditional classroom expectations and has really, they've literally fallen through the cracks. They are not succeeding, and you're sort of like the last effort to get them across the finish line. And you walked away from a library because you really just needed something that you could feel. I don't know what motivated you, except that you were so unhappy in your current situation in your library.
Yeah, let's dive a little bit into that because that became the catalyst for my research. Um, Talking about coming from a very comfortable place. Sometimes we have our libraries that are, well-oiled machines. We've been there for a while. We're established. Our culture is thriving. Some of us are even amazing at being embedded librarians, which means you have a working relationship that is fruitful with your faculty. The classes are coming in for lessons. I'm talking the dream bonds, right, that you have and the true manifestation of being, quote, the heart of the school. It's very, very visible. Going from that to all you're going to do is fix Chromebooks. Like in my interview at this place, I showed all the things in embedded librarianship. This is what I do. This is what I've done. I'm not just telling you I'm doing it. I'm proving to you, look at my portfolio, all the things. And 3 weeks into the job, the administrator's like, well, that's nice, but we just want you to fix Chromebooks. And just a pile and pile and pile and pile of Chromebooks, along with all other things that are associated with technology, inventory, processing defunct technology, doing all these things that have nothing to do with literacy support. And it was like running, like, I don't know, 100 miles an hour and running into a glass wall at full force. That's what it was for me. Enough to shake me to the core. Like, Wendy, what did you do? You left a wonderful library because you wanted to grow. You wanted more opportunities for growth. That's respectable. People do that all the time. And then this is what you end up with. And then instant regret. How do you pivot? What are you going to do? You're incredibly underutilized. Immediately I started to advocate, not just to the principal, to the teachers. I also inherited the library from a quite dormant librarian. I know this is going to be very unpopular, what I'm going to say, but not all of us are dynamic librarians. And unfortunately, administrators, it's like everything else. The perception, the impression that you give is sometimes you're walking in someone else's shadow, whether it's the administrator's librarian from their childhood, the shush person, or the person that, kids walk through the library and they automatically say, who sent you? Why are you here? Like, it's that person. Or sometimes they'll walk in front of the library and you'll just see them sitting down behind the circulation desk, and automatically there's a judgment in their brain that says they don't do anything, which is, where our performative nature is born, which is also not healthy. But walking into those shoes where you have an administrator who's like, well, y'all don't do anything. Every librarian that I've worked at, that has been at my school doesn't do anything, so I tell them what to do. That's what I walked into. And so trying to pivot from that, trying to advocate, not given the opportunity to bring in classes to generate data to prove my argument. Let me show you. None of that was happening. It really quickly affected my professional identity. And I didn't know it was that while it was happening. I only learned about that as I was studying for my PhD. that that's exactly what had happened to me. And so these are very difficult times. I know a lot of us go through some sort of displacement. It doesn't have to be a physical displacement. For me, it started with, job performance displacement, role function displacement, things like that. And it starts to affect your sense of self in a professional aspect and your professional merit and your worth as a professional. You start doubting yourself. Some of us agree to this stretching of our identity. Oh, you want me to be a testing administrator? Okay. You want me to be a technology fixer? Okay. You want me to, because that's how we see relevance. But in reality, that's hurting our literacy support, function and our expertise, because that's really what we went to school for. This is really where in collection curation, in lesson support, research and inquiry, project-based learning, that this is where our strengths are. But because we have to feel that we have to perform for you so that you could see our worth, we find ourselves compromising what we're really doing there. And in the long run, that in the research that I conducted for my autoethnography is very damaging to the librarian profession.
I was absolutely delighted to be invited to watch you defend your dissertation. I was also very relieved because at no point in watching you did I say, that's something I want to do. No. I was like, how nice for you. I'm so happy for you, Wendy. Dr. Prey, I'm going to watch this happen, and I am happy for you, and I am still happy being the podcaster that I am, so we can have you follow your bliss. Follow your bliss. I will follow mine. But I loved, watching you, because you at one point talked about benign neglect, and benign neglect by your administrator. And if I interpret what you were saying, for me, benign neglect is like being left alone. And I'm going to guarantee you there are listeners right now who would love more than anything to just be left alone by an administrator. Tell me, how did this really sort of push you to a place where you realized change needed to happen?
Well, benign neglect, as I applied in my research, is the idea that administrators want to do right by you. They want to do right by their librarian. They want to do right by, honoring what you do. And they think they're implementing your insight and your wisdom in a way that's productive and constructive. But in reality, they have zero clue as to what you do, into the length or the level of your capacity, into the breadth of what you can provide as support in the campus. And so it's almost like an ignorant approach to maximizing personnel, right, in your institution. And so that's what I mean by benign neglect. And I see that a lot. And I'm just going to be a little biased here, because I've been in several districts. I've worked in several schools. I'm nearing my second decade as a public school educator. And so I've been very fortunate to not be in the same district for my entire career. And I've been very fortunate to see many types of principals and leadership and many school dynamics. Not all of them have benign neglect. A lot of them have many checks on their to-do list and not enough hands to get those things done. And so they use a librarian, to get some of those things done. But some of them, I would argue, few of them, in my personal opinion, are really clueless. And so I would urge that librarian who wants to be left alone, who wants to do nothing, please, I do not want people in my space. I get that. But think about it because remember, everything that we do is about building relationships. And if you want an advocate, the strongest advocate for you is your school principal. So even if they're in your space for 5 minutes, because I guarantee you they're frying like 5 different fish on other pans that have nothing to do with you, try to maximize the little bit of time that they come to see you. And I know that can be a challenge at first, especially when you're in a new school and you don't know this person, because remember, we're all people. We're people before we are our titles, right? So you may not know how they quote unquote rule, right? When what this walkthrough means, what it is when they're, you may not know their nonverbals yet, things like that. But I would encourage you begin to plant the seeds for an ally as soon as you possibly can, because that person's vision or lack thereof can single-handedly build your program or destroy it. I've seen that many, many a time. So don't cringe when they come in. Don't be like, oh, customer service 101. I mean, that was my career before I became an educator. Customer service. Hello, how can I help? Come in. Look at this. Look what I did over here. Okay, have a great day. Because sometimes it's really that short. Oh, you want need help with that? Okay, great. Well, we're gonna have this lesson. Please come on in. Okay, bye. Sometimes it's that fast, but take advantage, maximize that, because if not, we feed into the benign neglect. And more dangerously, like most dangerously, I would say, when we begin to enact these stereotypes that they already think that we have or that we are, that becomes even more dangerous to break. And that reputation is almost impossible to reverse. Or, it's just really, really hard. So as much as I say that we should not act in a performative nature, which we do, we want to make sure people see what we're doing and that equals our value. Try to think about it as you are in control of your narrative when you act, how you act, what you say. Yes, they are always your audience, but you are the storyteller. We don't want them to tell your story for you. We're great at reading books. We're great at the read aloud. We're great at, okay, then let's tell our own story, which is what autoethnography is. This is my research methodology, like how I did it. I used my story and what happened to me. And when I said, you know what, I cannot fix another Chromebook. You are killing me. This is killing me. And it's fractured my identity as I don't even know who in the world I am right now. What am I even doing? I need to step away. And so I took my life and what I did, and I said, okay, Wendy, through this lens, you're going to try to communicate the culture of school librarians and what happens when they too are displaced in one way or another. That is what autoethnography is. So that's what I tried to do.
You have arrived at a place where your story can be told through this autoethnography, which you made available. And I love that, because as somebody who has struggled to read somebody's dissertation, I truly have. I thought, oh, you didn't write an article, you didn't write a book. Oh, it's your doctoral dissertation? Hand it over. I'll write an outline. My God. Oh, but could you work through, for people who are curious, your journey and this autoethnography is something that is so uniquely matched to the journey that you were experiencing in real time?
Yes, so I will simplify it as best as I can. So there's two types of research: qualitative research, which is about more social sciences, right? People telling their narratives. When people go do a case study, right? They'll go and they'll interview several people, or they'll have a survey and then they'll learn from this data, right? But it's all about the human experience, qualitative research. Quantitative is more the numbers, statistical things. What do the numbers say? And I knew immediately when I began my studies that my life was not going to be about a number. There was nothing about my experience that could be black and white as numbers are. There was a lot more color in there, and there was a lot of in-between space. And so when I learned about autoethnography, I first learned about ethnography, which is what a researcher does when they go into a culture, for example, and they try to immerse themselves in a particular culture and learn about their way of life. That's ethnography. But when you introduce the prefix auto, right, you're like, oh, now I'm looking at my life, but not as an autobiography. I'm not just writing about myself. When you say autoethno, so we're going to look at the etymology of the word. So auto is self, ethno is about the social context. So in my experience, my social focus is school librarians, the life of the school librarian. And then autoethnography is about writing about it. When I learned about that, I said, oh my gosh, this is perfect. Because as a teacher of credit recovery, I cannot give a survey to my students because they're my students. That is considered like some sort of manipulation of data. They're a protected population because they're minors. They're also a particular economical, status, and so they're protected by the institutional review board. I could never interview them, and they could never be a part of my research. But I felt that my story was incredibly important, and so autoethnography fit like a glove. So I just had to make sure, because a lot of people in the research world think, well, that's easy. You're just writing about yourself. What's rigorous about writing about yourself? And so I also learned about how people did not look so kindly on autoethnography because they thought you were somehow sacrificing, what makes research, I guess. I just call it rigor, the rigorous part of research. But I said, you know what? This is actually perfect. And it keeps me accountable because I'm not talking about myself. That little root word ethno is in there. And so I need to keep my profession in mind, the future of my practice, the role that I play as a librarian. That needs to be central to what I'm talking about. It's not just about a Wendy gripe fest because she doesn't want to fix Chromebooks. It's not a Wendy gripe fest about, oh, I had to leave the library because my administrator has benign neglect or, loves that phrase, other duties as assigned, and doesn't really, think about anything else I do. I had to be faithful to the research process. And I got to tell you, Amy, it was not easy. It was not easy to, uh, in essence, rip my life apart and revisit some of the most challenging times in my career, some of the most sad times, some of the most vulnerable times in my life, things that I would probably only share with my husband and very close friends, and have to publish these things to show that, you know what? Nobody's talking about the stress people go through because we stayed fixing Chromebooks even after the pandemic. Nobody's talking about that. But librarians are exhausted. Librarians are tired. And because they still want to be relevant, and now with emerging technologies and emerging all these AI and, oh my God, are we really endangered species? Have we gone from, threatened to endangered? What's happening? I need to keep my job. I need to be relevant. So nobody's talking about these things. And I said, you know what? Maybe if I write my story in a way of research, it may not only enlighten or embolden librarians to do the same, but most importantly, hey, administrator, wake up. This is what happens when you make the decisions that you make. And you're not just affecting one person's life. Look at how displacing a librarian affects student academic achievement in your entire campus. Think about the ripples of one no that you say to library programming. Think about the ripples that causes. And so I tried to write this research. I thought the autoethnographic approach would be the most reader-friendly approach. I did not want people to have your experience reading my dissertation. I wanted it to be, I can do this. I can read this. And oh my God, she put poems in there too. I get poetry. There's something about poetry that captures what prose can't, and definitely captures what statistics can't. And so my research is poetic autoethnography.
Well, and as somebody who it was unforgettable. I was in library school, and my professors said, "Friends," and my library program, I was very grateful, was 100% in person.
Oh, wonderful!
And yeah, it was 100% in person. I was I went to library school at a time when I was at home with my 4-year-old and twin 18-month-olds.
Oh, well.
And so the fact is, I didn't want to be at home, doing Zoom. That was not something that was, not when I was getting my degree. And you better believe that I took my classes on purpose so I could get out of the house and reclaim my brain.
Yep.
So I went to class because all my classes were in person. I went to class, and my favorite professor said, "Hey, today we're going to do 1 hour on statistics. And after this hour, you will know if you have what it takes to get a doctorate. And I swear to God, about 5 minutes into that statistics class, I was ready to just walk out of the room. You had lost me in the first 5 minutes. I wanted to gouge my ears and eyes out with a spoon. I was so unhappy. I was like, I paid a babysitter to come here and be miserable. And they're like, and that, my friends, is statistics.
It's statistics. Yeah, it's tough.
If that's your jam, you can now go get ready, buckle up. You can go get that PhD. I was like, oh, I'm out. So I went home and I said, guess what? I'm getting this master's degree and I will never say, hey, you know what I think I want to do is get my doctorate, get my PhD. Because if I have to do statistics, there's no way this is going to happen.
Yeah, I had to take those classes too. And I was lucky to have wonderful teachers that did not feed that confusion and that fear of like, what are these numbers? I was ready to go either way, but I just thought I felt so strongly in my life in that moment that I wanted to write something about it, because they tell you, pick your topic and make sure you're very careful about what you pick, because there needs to be a need for this research. There's nothing or very little of it out there, one. And two, you're going to be married to this topic for at least 2 to 3 years. So make sure you pick wisely. Don't pick something that is going to annoy the living daylights out of you. Pick something that you can do and you can be with Mary for 3 years. And so that's why I said, yeah, quant is not so much for me. I'm going to go with qualitative.
So I do have to ask, because, you introduced when you defended your dissertation, there were some terms that I connected with right away, and there's some ones that definitely needed explanation.
Okay.
The one I think everybody needs to recognize, because this happens all the time, first of all, job creep.
Yes.
Job creep. So could you explain to listeners why this is something which really should not happen, and when it does, we have to recognize it for what it is?
Yes. So I use the term job creep in my research and I use this exact verbiage in my dissertation, is other duties as assigned. It's perfect. And so job creep is the manifestation of all these little extra things that your administrator asks you to do, and then very slowly become permanent things in your job description. And more dangerously, and I keep saying that term, more dangerously, but it's because I've lived the effects of this. And so a lot of the times, evaluative tools become skewed because you now, like this happened to me this year, specifically this year. It became skewed because one member of the administrative team left mid-year. And so as a person who likes to help, right, because that's who we are as librarians, we are helpers. Oh, Wendy, can you help with this and this and this and this? And I say yes, right? So that introduces a new function, a new duty into what I'm doing that has nothing to do with my original job description or my evaluative tool. But let's pretend that that person does not get replaced, this person who left their job. And now all of those additional duties and those functions and those tasks now become a permanent part of what I do. So that's job creep. Now, the important thing for us is, and this may be hard for a 0 to 5 year librarian, and I would even argue some librarians who are close to retiring. This may be difficult for those two ends of the spectrum because you don't want to seem oppositional, right? When these jobs come, you don't want to say no. That's not a good word. You're not a team player. But I would encourage you, become very familiar and confident in what you bring to the table. You are the only person who does what you do on your campus. You are the expert in curating, in facilitating, in instructing, in co-teaching. You are the only one who knows how to do that. Lean into that confidence. Step into that and use that to say, yes, I will help you for this academic year, for example, which is what I ended up saying. Oh, you need help until May? Yes, I will help you until May. And don't be afraid to set professional boundaries, right? There's now, of course, AI, but there's a lot of free tools out there that can help coach us on how to navigate these seemingly uncomfortable conversations that we may need to have when we advocate for ourselves. But I think that all comes from a place of confidence. You dictate your worth in that space. Your principal does not give it to you. Your administrator does not give it to you. You are the person who steps into the room. Again, you are the narrator. You are the person telling your narrative, right? You're the person who tells your story.
And job creep results in the stretched identity. So
Mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm.
identify that, you talk about how we recognize and who we are as
Right.
professionals. But as a result of job creep, which oftentimes happens because we are always trying to adapt and stay relevant, and in trying to adapt and stay relevant, and that job creep, our identity as to what we do and the purpose we serve to our school community gets
Yes.
stretched.
Yes. And that over time can be detrimental to us. It was to me, to the point to where it fractured, who I was. And a lot of people may think, "Hi, Wendy, you're just too analytical. Like, just get over it. Just walk right through it." And I'm like, well, yeah, but I mean, think about this. We started fixing Chromebooks in 2020. Some schools that were in affluent communities had one-to-one, you know, devices before the pandemic. And now look at us. That's a perfect example of job creep, a perfect example of a stretched identity. Another thing I talk about in my dissertation is all the different name changes we've given ourselves. If that's not proof of a stretched identity, are we librarians? Are we teacher librarians? We have difficulty branding who we are because of all the job creep and all the stretching of our identity, right? That's also a telltale sign of our need to adapt and what we've gone through as a profession as a whole to try to remain relevant. And now people can't even look back. Okay, where was our reference point? I have no idea. Am I a literacy support person? I have no clue what I am now at this point. At the end of my research, I was like, my God, all these stretch marks, mothers can attest. People who have, gained some weight like me, and you're back, okay, not have all these stretch marks testify like this crazy journey I've been on. And I have all these things like, now what do I do? How do I identify? Where do I find my self-worth? And most importantly, how do I advocate for myself at this table? People are like, "Oh, get a seat at the table." How do I get that seat? And what do I say when I get there? All of these things affect, all of these different aspects of our profession. It's not just about advocating for our libraries, guys. It's not just about advocating for our kids. It's about advocating for ourselves. Like, how many libraries have we seen where they're like, "Oh, we don't need you. We could just replace you with a paraprofessional." Then you don't really understand. That's beyond benign neglect. You have no idea what you've just sacrificed for students.
Well, and I think that when I look at what guides me on a daily basis, I think as long as I am part of the solution,
Right.
I am bringing my best game to the people I support every day. And that's hard because sometimes what success looks like
Mhm.
is it's a little vague, and I can't sit there and honestly say I'm like right now I'm putting together my stats, my end of year evaluation tool with all my evidence that I can bring to show my principal. But I got to tell you, there's certain circulation stats.
Yeah.
Oh, friend, I know I'm not the only school librarian for whom, if I need to show evidence of success, I'm not pointing to circulation stats because I'll tell you what, I'm just lucky I have a collection at all.
Yeah.
And a lot of that goes back to branding. I'm the
Yeah.
information research technology specialist and online coordinator
There you go.
because and I don't work in a library, I work in a learning commons.
Mhm.
So understand that where circulation stats are like that's not even in my purview, because according to them, I've got all these other jobs that I have to do.
Right.
I'm the embodiment of job creep, and yet I'm not going to get a PhD. So
No, you don't need to. You don't need to
no,
get a PhD.
I don't need
Not at all.
I don't need to get a PhD. I do want you to talk a little bit about liminality,
Yes.
because liminality was something when I was sort of like drinking this in, I'm like listening to you. Can you give us an idea of liminality and how this works with your journey in getting your PhD?
So yes, so liminality is an idea that is not new. Back in the 1900s, there was this French social ethnographer who was studying tribes and their culture. And so one of the things that he picked up on was how people were transitioning from one social role to another, right? Either somebody was becoming an elder, or when they were getting married, or when they had a different function within the, organization of the tribe. And so he said, you know what? There's phases here. There's 3 different stages that I'm observing. And so the first stage is the preliminal stage, right? And he's like, this is where they're in the world that they know. They're very comfortable in that role. They know their job well. It's something that they're comfortable with. It's the familiar. So we're going to call that the preliminal phase. But then he would notice that there was always an event that was the catalyst to some change that was going to happen. And so that event changes that area of comfort, that familiar phase. And so he said, oh, this is stage 2. This is called the liminal phase. And the liminal phase is characteristic because it's this in-between phase. Like you're not who you were before, but you're still not who you will become. So there's all this like unfamiliarness, this discomfort. It's weird in this in-between space. So we're going to call that the liminal phase. And then that passes and you learn the new ropes, you learn all the aspects of, your new role. And when you assimilate, he called it reintegration. So he said, oh, that is the last phase. That's the post-liminal phase, right? So I use this concept of liminality in my dissertation because that's how I first saw my displacement from the library. I was very comfortable in the library before, doing my thing, embedded librarian, being successful, all the things that I loved. And then, hit that glass wall going 100 miles an hour. Now you're just fixing Chromebooks. That was the catalyst for this in between space. And then me deciding, being forced to leave the library, that became the liminal space when I went to credit recovery. And then I recently rejoined the librarians, right? About 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I came back into the library. And so I saw that as the post-liminal, right? Now I'm back to, I wouldn't call it back to normal, because going through this liminal phase, there's an aspect in that, there's a growth that happens in that discomfort. Another researcher talks about that, and I really leaned into that part of liminality, that you're not the same. You're not the same after you go through some sort of ordeal. It's a challenging time, and so that changes us. It's very revealing. It enlightens us, and it, in my case, empowered me. It gave me what my current administrator says, quote unquote, street cred, when I go and, let's have a conversation about, student involvement in the library. Let's have a conversation about bringing classes in. And so that's what liminality is. It's the 3 phases of, life. And I would argue, in light of the research that I did and examining my own life, that liminality, or the liminal space, that in-between space for us, can be different things. Like you were talking about your difference in title, the different dynamic in your campus, it's different for all of us. A moment that we may think we're comfortable and we have comfort may one day be the preliminal phase, and the next time it could be the liminal phase itself, right? Afterwards, I thought, you know what? I thought my comfortable place, or my place of zen, was being a librarian. If I really thought about it, maybe my place in credit recovery was my place of zen, where I could truly be a librarian. I wasn't fixing Chromebooks. I was helping people with, how to write a resume, a mini version of library programming. Maybe that was the preliminal for me where I was comfortable. And now being back in the library, advocating, fighting censorship, fighting for my job, trying to stay relevant, maybe that is the unfamiliar and the anti-structure. So I gotta be honest, sometimes dissertations or these studies are like, this is, the conclusion. But for me particularly, it opened up a lot more questions and a lot more opportunity to continue the discussion. What is it that librarians are going through? And how can we navigate these liminal spaces?
Well, and I do give you a lot of credit because the path that you chose in getting your PhD required that you hyper scrutinize your journey, but from your perspective is as an audience member. You're sort of forcing yourself to reevaluate what you're doing from a perspective at like an anthropologist would watch, people.
Right.
And so let's study what's happening. And you have to look at your own role in what you are assessing and realizing where you feel comfortable, where you feel fractured. And it truly, that's not easy because it would be far easier to sort of try to remove yourself from the immediacy of those stressors. But it took some discipline, some academic discipline, but in having this goal of getting a PhD, you sort of assigned yourself the role of fixing what was so maddening and frustrating to you when you were working in less than ideal circumstances. I really try to move away from the word normal. I use the word typical. I say, we're going to talk about a typical day. There's nothing normal about any day.
Yeah.
That's so fraught with judgment. And I like to use the word typical day. Like, what's a typical day? So no, this is absolutely incredibly helpful. Wendy, I can't let you go without asking you just a little bit more about the finished product, about writing your autoethnography, because as somebody who has seen doctoral dissertations printed out, and we're talking about these tomes and people quantifying their research by holding the dissertation with not one but two hands because it's so the voluminous. Is that a word? The volume is massive, right? Yes, the volume is absolutely massive. But when it comes to autoethnography, I think one of the most appealing things about it is how accessible it is to individuals who want to learn about your journey.
Yes, autoethnography is a method that is very seldom used by school librarians, which attracted me to it. There's a lot of research that is needed written by the school librarian about the school librarian. So autoethnography is a wonderful method, and I strongly recommend people read Carolyn Ellis's work. She is a pioneer, uh, a fundamental member of the autoethnography movement, and just she's one of the pioneers, the people who brought it into research. And then Arthur Bochner, and I'll share this with you, Amy, so you can put in the research notes. Anything by these two, and there are many others, but these two are the pillars, I would say, of autoethnography. So if people want to learn more about that, because you do not have to write a dissertation. When I wrote my dissertation, I wanted it for the average person to read and understand, and I wanted it to be accessible. So you do not have to write this massive 300-page, giant thing. To me, the purpose of being a researcher is to help people understand each other better. And so autoethnography does just that. And I got to be honest, I'm so excited because every single librarian that I've shared my journey with has become incredibly interested, has a lot of questions, and is eager to share stories. I mean, there is such a thing as a duo ethnography, which is two people collaborating together to tell their story, right? So that's amazing. There is such a thing as collaborative autoethnography, right? Which is many librarians talking about maybe one particular issue, sharing their stories and what do their stories reveal about this particular thing they want to talk about. So I want to encourage anybody out there, read Carolyn Ellis, Arthur Bochner. They are amazing, but start writing, dabbling in telling your own story. And don't be afraid to look in the mirror, because I will tell you, it wasn't the academic rigor that was the most difficult. It was, don't get me wrong, but the most challenging thing for me was to look at myself in the mirror and to be honest with myself about what I was feeling, what that revealed about who I was as a person, the fears that emerged about my profession. I not only had to be the participant, as you mentioned earlier, Amy, I had to look at myself as a researcher and then as the poet analyzing what I was going through and be faithful and true to each one of those people that I had to play. And that was the most challenging thing. But I will tell you, it may not have solved, well, what happened to me, Wendy? What is it that happened to you? I may not have gotten or received or discovered a clean answer for that, but it definitely gave me a sense of closure. It's like any type of difficult thing where you go through and sometimes you don't want to talk about it. Sometimes there's triggers and it's hard for you. But writing this, going through this journey now puts me in a place mentally and emotionally where I can not just talk about it, but maybe help others, other school librarians who are going through something similar.
Dr. Prey, I am so excited for you and where you have sort of emerged after this journey. It's wonderful. I love learning from you. And I feel like, our friendship, we go back a ways.
I'm thankful for you too. You're an amazing person who just helps us grow. We really are better together. What you've done with your podcast is amazing.
Well, most important, I need you to be happy and have a satisfying experience in your life, your professional life, because it truly is. There's so much we've been able to learn from you at this point, and I'm so excited. Moving forward, we can continue to learn more. But Dr. Prey, thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you again.
You've got to order those business cards.
I know, friends. I know. I'll get there. I am in the what is it called, where you don't go like up the hill, just coming down, just chilling. It's a big endeavor to close, and so I'm kind of enjoying closing this chapter of my life and just chilling. But I will definitely get the business cards.
Fantastic. Listen, thank you so much. And hey, happy, we're into spring, and
That's
I know
right.
the school year is rapidly coming to an end, and I look forward to our paths crossing in the future.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, for anybody who wants to follow me on social media, on Instagram, I am Pray Tell Librarian. I'm also on LinkedIn, just wpray, or you can search for me, Wendy Pray. My name is with 2 N's, by the way, Wendy with 2 N's. And then on Bluesky, I'm wpray. And then I also have a website, wpray.com.
All right, we'll put all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much, and have a fantastic rest of the school year.
You too, my friend. You too.
Friends, listeners who are curious to learn more about Dr. Prey's journey and autoethnography, I encourage you to explore the resources linked in today's show notes. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review. Wherever you listen to podcasts, reviews help others find us. If you're curious to know how often your state or country is featured on the podcast, then simply click on the link which can be found in the show notes, search title, author, state, and country, and do a Command F search. I hope this is the year you consider being a guest on the show. Please visit the FAQs in every episode and you'll realize just how easy it is. We all have something to share. Make 2026 your time to shine. I'm currently juggling several outlines and tentative recording dates. You can be sure our upcoming episodes will showcase amazing school librarians sharing their strategies and resources. I hope you will tune in.